Welcome to the Pursue Jesus podcast. Today we are interviewing Jake Gibbs. He's the lead pastor at Go Church in Spring Hill, Florida. Jake, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, man, honored to be here, dude. This is awesome.
And me and Jake go way back. He was my youth pastor for 2 or 3 years. Took me to CIYs. We had a great time.
Yeah.
A huge part of my faith journey, and glad he can be with us today. So, Jake, I just kind of want to open up with what led you into ministry? I mean, you've been in ministry for many years now, but what made you walk into it?
Wow. Yeah, man, that's awesome. Again, Jack, honored to do this and so proud of what you're doing and your pursuit of Jesus for sure. But yeah, I love thinking about it. So I know for me, I was a young kid. I was 16, 17 years old and learning about Jesus. Once I realized the length of love and the things that he did for me, I just kind of came to the conclusion, frankly, I thought everybody comes to the same conclusion that how could you not give everything you've got back? If he did everything he said he did for us, which everything he says he's proven and it's true, how could you be the same after? And I said, yeah, I mean, gosh, if you did all that for me, I'll give you everything I got. So
Yeah.
I said yes, and just it's been the joy of my life ever since, for sure.
And your
And
first,
it's crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
no, you got, yeah, yeah. What was
I
crazy?
was just gonna say it was crazy because I'm so glad for this, I guess, like, beautiful accident, because what happened is I was in Southern California. I met Jesus, said yes. I'm like, you're the best ever. I just want to follow you. And so I'm meeting guys at church, like brand new to stuff. And so I see the pastors, and Kyle Idleman was the guy there. And I said, man, I want to be like these guys. I want to be a pastor and follow Jesus, I think, because they seem like they're doing it well. And so I just kind of thought following Jesus meant going to Bible college. Like, you go to a small group or you go to youth group. I just thought
Yeah.
you go to Bible college. And so I went to Joplin, Missouri, went to Ozark. And then I get there and it's like, well, you need to figure out what you're going to do for your degree. And I'm like, well, geez, like, is there just like can you just put Christian like as
That's right.
your, and so it was a cool kind of, I'm thankful that I had my priorities in the right spot early, to where I just wanted more of him. And of course, the beautiful thing is going into ministry and doing all the things that we get opportunities to do is a great way to get to know him better. And so it's been that same heartbeat ever since. Like, how could you not? And I'm sure you're in the same boat, Jack, where many years later, I can't imagine something more meaningful than what we get to do in ministry. Like,
No, yeah,
I
no way.
can't think of a better job than investing in people for the sake of the gospel. Like, it doesn't get any better than this. So yeah, God's been good.
Yeah, it's amazing. And your first job after Bible college was a CCW?
No, so Ozark, and at Ozark we did this thing called supply preaching. So it's in the Bible Belt. And so there's all these churches like right down the street, and there's the whole story to this stuff. But we'd be students and learning and getting educated on how to preach, and we'd have places we could go supply preach. So the church, has nobody that's the pastor anymore, or something happened, and so they could call the Bible college, and we go show up and help. So I was preaching in McCune, Kansas during Ozark for over a year, and that was really formative for me to learn how to preach in a real context.
Yeah.
And then after I graduated, then we moved to actually Ocala. So I was a minister in Ocala for a year and a half.
Okay.
Actually, no, it wasn't even a whole year. I was the youth and young adult pastor. And that kind of, I'm not going to say blew up, but I learned some good lessons during that season. And then we kind of went to CCW, because that was where Jamie, my wife, was from. And we just started serving. We just said, we still want to love God, but we're not sure what it looks like. Let's just go help out. And then that turned into children's ministry. I got hired on at CCW to do that. And then that led to youth
Right.
ministry. That's where we connected. And then, yeah, ultimately into church planning, which is where I'm at on the journey right now.
Yeah. So what interests me is you're at CCW, you're the youth pastor. You probably have 80 kids in your youth group. I don't know. Like, it was decent
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
Comfortable job, stable environment. And then you're like, let me go do a church plan with brand new, starting over, risks, all these different things. Like, what led you to kind of take that jump?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man, shoot, that's one of my favorite parts of the story. So when I was at Ozark, so before all the CCW stuff, I took a church planning course, and it was crazy because it was like I signed up for it because your curriculum or your tuition fee, it was like $200 or something to take the course. It was cheaper course, and it was just a 2 week thing, but it included a plane ticket to New York City. And I'm like, that's cool. Like,
Right.
why not? Yeah, I'm like, how'd they squeeze that in? But all right, whatever. And so I went, and it was a week long, like, so it was 2 weeks. The first week was like, I think it was Orchard Group at the time was the name of the church planning organization. But so I met like 15 church planners in New York City. One of them was John Tyson, which is actually really cool.
Yeah.
But like all these phenomenal guys, and I'm like, this is church planning in New York City. So I was super intimidated and inspired by what was happening. And then the part two of this church planning class was that you go. So now we're back in Joplin, and it's like a church planning assessment. So you kind of get grouped up with different people, and you have to make like a template for how you would do church, how you would preach, what you would do, and then you present it to like, bro, like an American Idol like panel of judges. Like they're all sitting there kind of like watching you do your thing. And then at
Wow.
the end they kind of grade you like, hey, and like, so we're all in line at the end of the 2 weeks, and there's 15 guys ahead of me, and some of them were coming out crying, like messed up, and they're like, I mean, they tell you straight. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
this
That's
is
not
gonna
right.
be bad. And so I
Yeah.
get in there, and they're like, listen, you're young, but we think you could do this. And
Wow.
I'll never forget being like, and again, this is 19-year-old Jake. So this is a long time ago. And I thought,
Yeah.
but that stuck with me for a long time. So I always had this kind of nudge in me like, hey, maybe this is something God wants me to do. And so, yes, I loved what I was doing at CCW and was so blessed to be a part of that. But I kind of saw where I was in my faith. And, the way I used to say it, and it's still true, I'm like, to be a good youth pastor at CCW at the time with Jeff Jacobs and Dave Pardue and Joe Caputo, I'm like, you could be a monkey with a tie on and do a good job. Like those guys made it so easy for me to do it. So it wasn't, I was so blessed, and I figured a lot of things out, but I felt like I got really comfortable, and I wasn't tested very much, and I could see my complacency. I just kind of was starting to get stale even in
Mm.
my faith. And so I noticed that. And then, the story goes that Dave Pardue, the pastor at the time, had this like, hey, we don't want to build a bigger building. We want to plant a church, and we want you guys to pray about it. And I was like, oh, shoot, here we go. Because again, I have this story of it had already been in my heart for years. And there'd been little things along the way where God had been kind of putting stuff in my path. And I was like, oh, shoot, this might be the moment. And I didn't want to go. And so I ended up being homesick, or no, I was home watching my daughter Genesis, who was a baby at the time. So Jamie went, my wife, and she comes home and she says, how you kind of had that thing about church planting? She's like, I think if there's ever a time to do it, this might be the healthiest because it's planted from CCW and it's a good
Yeah.
church, and that we should really consider it. And I'm like, and then she goes say, all right, I'm gonna go take a nap, hope Genesis feels better. And my mind's spinning. I'm like, okay, my wife is affirming that we should do this.
Yeah.
I've got this like, burden in my heart that's, I knew that if I prayed about it, he
Mhm.
was gonna get my attention. And of course he
Yeah.
did. But a lot of it came from, yeah, I knew that I was getting complacent. And then one of my favorite things to look back on it was that this really wasn't an overnight thing where he had been preparing me to do this since Ozark when I was 17 years old. And so, it was definitely a big step of faith to say, okay, God, I trust you, and I'm going to say yes. And I don't have all the details, but I mean, he's been good every day since. Like, he's kept his side of it. And so, yeah, I'm going to take a step of faith. And yeah, man, it was an incredible step of faith to say yes to something that was much bigger than me. And God's been good. And, he's, yeah, it's been awesome.
So 10 years later, you're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's really not common, I would say, and I could
Yeah.
be wrong, but I don't think it's common for church planners to even stay for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what keeps you there? Because I'm sure there's extra stress being a church planner where it's like you could press the eject button and go back to kind of more of a comfortable
Mm-hmm.
job where not everything's all on you. Like what
Mm-hmm.
keeps you as a church planner?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Good question. I still wrestle through it even because again, like kind of where we started, when you realize what Jesus did for you, how could you not give him everything you've got? And so I just thought, I'm just saying yes. And that's really, I think, the only reason where I am is I just kind of kept saying yes to when he put opportunities in front of me. And I don't know theologically where I land on calling into ministry, because I kind of feel like he gives us all a calling, like we're all supposed to be obedient to that Great Commission.
Yeah.
But over the years, I definitely have seen this thing where he's given me a supernatural energy to do what I do. Because if it was up to me, I would have burnt out a long time ago. But
Yeah.
I definitely have seen like a supernatural energy to do this. I still enjoy it. I still love it. It's still very hard and taxing and exhausting. But I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this on my own strength. And so, God, is this one of the ways that you're showing me that you called me into this because you've sustained me to do it? And then, Jack, like there's been so many stories where, through COVID and all the different things we've gone through in the last 10 years, I'm like, okay, so you're protecting me. You're protecting this. Like, this is what you wanted me to do. And so, again, I don't know where I'm at with calling because I think we're all called into it. But, I do feel like a special assignment maybe, and
Mm.
how to be obedient to what he told me to do. But yeah, I feel him over it. And then again, kind of where I said before is that I frankly can't imagine something better, that I would want to do. But it definitely comes with its difficult days. But we serve a God that just is always better than all that stuff. Yeah, it's a beautiful tension to live in. Of I'm exhausted. I could be done, but he's
Yeah.
greater, and it's for a bigger purpose. Yeah, man. I don't know. The book's not finished yet on
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
he's telling me to do with all that.
So, what keeps you sustained then? What practices have you implemented to sustain you in a crazy season where you're sometimes at the edge of burnout?
Yeah, good question, man. I'm not always sure. I definitely think one of my favorite consistent lessons from when I was getting ready to walk out the door and plant and go church from CCW, lots of wonderful conversations, a lot of people being very helpful. And one of the most consistent that I remember was, hey, Jake, make sure you preach the word, stay close to the word, make sure you keep that there. Because, of course, I have, like 20 church planning books and how to do it.
For sure.
But the word of God, and stay anchored in that. And that's been such a helpful guide for me, even to where we're preaching through First and Second Timothy right now. And I live in that text to where First Timothy chapter 4 talks about, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example. And so that was me for Bible college. Again, I went when I was younger, and so I kind of had a lot of older people. And so how do I navigate this? And so that was a lot of my journey. But then, for me, as I said yes to church planning, I became one of the older ones in the room. And I said, well, this doesn't apply to me as much. But it's so beautiful because as I keep reading First Timothy in chapter 4, it says, hey, don't neglect your gifts. I want you to preach and teach you. The elders
Yeah.
laid hands on you. And when you do this with diligence and be devoted to it, you can save both yourself and your hearers. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is me. I'm in this season of the text, and to use your gifts and to do what God told you to do. And so, yeah, I have so much, firm foundation in what the word says. And that has helped me a lot for sure too. But I think, again, there's just a supernatural blessing that I don't know how to explain all the time, because I don't think I've ever taken I suppose, a healthy version of sabbatical rest. I know I've seen it done before. Sometimes it looks like that was the right way. Other times I'm not sure. I think I've just got fortunate to where, I kind of have a rhythm of rest. So every week taking time to kind of catch my breath. And again, I'm sure we both know that like sabbatical rest is not just taking a nap, like it's being anchored in Jesus. Like he fills the tank. So he just kind of keeps filling it to where I still want to talk about him every day I get a chance to. Like it's not
Mm.
like I want to less. I only want to more, which is just part of how beautiful he is. But yeah, I just sense like a supernatural, man. I should be tired by this point, and I should be ready to be done. But he just has given me a sustain that has to only be explained by his power and the gift of the Holy Spirit. And it's been such a joy. So I kind of maybe bank on him a little bit, maybe even more than I should, because there are healthy habits to where taking that time to catch your breath and look at what you're doing with your time, and that you're being obedient to it. So it's a work in progress, where again I'm kind of in a season, if I can be honest with you, in 2025 already, golly, where yeah, I am asking, hey God, are you trying to tell me something different, or is there something you want me to see? And the way I look at it too, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but the analogy of sharpening an axe, right? So if I'm out cutting a tree and I just kind of keep my head down, keep going, that blade's going to get dull and I'm going to be less effective over time. And so you have to stop, you have to quit chopping the tree for a minute, go back and sharpen it, and then
Mm.
get back to it. So that to me is kind of what Sabbath is. And then also, of course, because I'm an artist,
Yeah,
it's like drawing to where, yeah, like to where if I'm drawing, like a superhero and trying to figure out how he looks in his face, I'll be down kind of drawing and focusing, but then you have to kind of, as an artist, you have a moment where you kind of step back and kind of look at like, okay, proportionally, like the head's too big or this doesn't fit right. And so I kind of see the big picture and then I can go back in and kind of get to the details. And so all those things are kind of, I've learned how to let me take a step back and look. And so I sense that I'm in that season right now where, again, 10 years in,
yeah.
hey God, is there something that you want me to sharpen? Is there something you want me to take back and get proper perspective on? To be the most effective for His kingdom and to do what He asked me to do. Man, I just kind of got to talk, and I think I answered that, but you got some
No,
good
yeah.
questions.
No, that was good. Yeah, that was perfect. So you're doing ministry, but when you go home, you don't take a break because you have how many kids now?
Yeah, 4 kids, man.
Four kids. And so I have two kids. So when I go home, it's me like, here's the baby. I've sometimes taken a walk. So it feels like I'm on 24/7. Now, your family gives you a certain sense of joy for sure, but it's a hustle and bustle. So, how does your family at time affect your ministry and vice versa?
Yeah. So I think two pivotal lessons that have been so helpful. One of them was Dave Pardue, so a pastor that we both learned from a little bit, and he helped me early to see, hey Jake, be careful of the mistress of ministry. So making ministry so important that I don't want to be that guy where 20 years from now I'm like, hey, where'd my kids go?
Yeah,
And I poured all my time into the ministry and I didn't make them a priority. And so that was a good lesson that I was kind of modeled even from Dave many years ago, and that was very helpful. And then too, I think it was probably Craig Rochelle, but just kind of the idea of prioritizing your loves, so God's first and then my wife, which that's not a Hallmark card, but like, hey, like I love God more than I love Jamie, and that's healthy actually for
yep,
her. It's even better.
definitely.
And then yeah, and then my kids are after that, and then my ministry, and then me. And so that's so it's a good kind of compass to keep me centered. But I think one of the ways I saw it the most was during COVID when, and there were so many lessons that I didn't learn, but I did learn some, was when the world was shutting down. Of course, the adults, Jamie and I, are stressing and freaking out. Like, what are we supposed to do? Church, we can't meet anymore. Like, we had to be digital. And then, where are we going to go? And so we've got all this stuff, but the kids, they had no idea. They're just like, hey, we don't have to go to school. Like, this is awesome. We get to be home.
Yeah,
And so the joy that my kids had, it just that had such a breath of fresh air to Jamie and I. Were like, wow, like we just need to get on their level. Like let's just be happy. Like we have each other, we have more time together, and so yeah, just kind of enjoying the moment and being with them. And yes, with 4 kids, man, it goes fast. Genesis is 14, my oldest. She's like a young adult. I can't stand it. I got a teenager. And it's like, man, I got to treasure these moments because it goes so fast. And so, you got to be present and be present with them because then, this, like the kingdom of God, especially the local church, there's always going to be a minister. God provides in his kingdom. But my wife only has one husband and my kids only have one dad. And so make sure I prioritize that. And then when I am more present with them, it makes me better because, and this is a hard lesson, but one I'm still learning, is there's always going to be more stuff to do at church. Like I think I have a good week and I get stuff done.
yeah,
There's always more stuff. Like I never complete, like, and so just take it one step at a time. Do the best I can with the time that I have, but prioritize my beautiful family because they, soon, like too soon, it will just be my wife and I, and it'll be a
yeah,
quiet house, and I'll miss all of this. So even though it's crazy, and it is crazy, I gotta be in the present and enjoy the blessing that I have right now.
yeah. Amen. I mean, are you guys done having kids at this point?
Yes, sir. Yeah, shop's closed. We're good. Well, so we got 4. I still do kind of want to adopt,
Okay.
and we might. And I mean, I won't go into the details, but I've got an extended family member on my side where we might have to step into foster.
Wow.
And so there's yeah, we'll see, but I don't know, man. Yeah, 4 is good. Like I gotta, my cup runneth over. I'm good,
Yeah.
bro.
Enough of them with your DNA.
Bro, dude, I'm saying, and my 2 boys, let me tell you, dude, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that your family's doing well and ministry is going well. Do you feel so you're at Go Church for 10 years? Have you built yourself up a team where you kind of depend on one another? Or do you feel like and I think I know the answer to this question, or do you feel like you have the tendency just to do it all yourself?
Yeah, it's definitely more the latter of the two. So I mean, I have a good preaching team. I have a smaller staff. But yeah, it's really primarily me, and that's a big lesson I'm learning. I just will struggle with delegating. And it's interesting to me though, because what I've seen in myself is that I assumed, if there's a hard thing to do, if there's a hard conversation to have, if there's a mess to clean up, if there's something that someone doesn't else want to do, the noble thing as a servant leader would be, hey, you know what, let me do it. I'll do the hard thing. If I want you to only do the easy stuff, let me do the hard thing. And so that's put me in a position where I'll do most of the things. And so what ultimately that really means is that I'm robbing them of a blessing, and I'm taking that for myself. Also, it means that I'm not giving other people opportunities to grow. And so even though I might, want to mask it with like a noble servant leader kind of thing, it ultimately is more of a pride. It's a pride to say, I can do it. And so, yeah, man, I really am trying to get, rip the Band-Aid off and kind of get to
Yeah.
the core. Like, what is the reason why? Yeah. So and gosh, most all things lead back to, it's probably the pride and sin that has made me, in these positions I don't want to be in.
Yeah.
And so it's been good to kind of wrestle that one a little bit, not to the ground yet, because it's still a work in progress, but
For
because there
sure.
is so much joy, when you build a team and get to see people step up and step into ministry, man, that's massive. That's huge.
Yeah. So, what is something you would say to someone? Because the point of this podcast, I want to encourage people who are going through it. Maybe they have health issues, maybe they're struggling with sin. What do you just say to someone who's going through it? Maybe contemplating, you know, maybe not life or death, maybe they are, but maybe just contemplating going to church again, maybe contemplating taking that step out in faith. I know it's a lot, but what would you say to that person who's just really struggling in their faith?
Yeah, that is the big one for sure. I mean, I think I've never regretted, even in leadership, being authentic. There's never a time where I'm like, man, you know what? I think I was too honest today. I think I was too vulnerable.
Yeah,
Again, there's some discernment with leadership, but in general, as a Christian, I think that's so important. Real quick story. I remember in Bible college. Again, I said yes to Jesus when I was younger, and so I went to Bible college, and all of a sudden, everybody knows everything. And I'm here. I just met Jesus a year ago, and I don't know
yeah,
these stories. And then I heard Jesus speak about, woe to you, you whitewashed tombs. And it scared me to death, this idea of there are people that present themselves in a certain way, but on the inside, they're dying, they're a corpse. And I never saw it more, prevalent than I did in Bible college and in ministry and in churches. Because unfortunately, as Christians, we hide what's really going on really well, and it's dangerous. And so I remember at CCW I was talking to kids about the Trinity, which is not a small thing. It's a big deal. And it was a elementary school kid.
yeah,
Actually, you know who the kid is. And I remember saying all these things, and I looked at him and I said, does that make sense? And he just kind of nodded. And I could tell, I'm like, you didn't get any of this. Like, this went in one ear and out the other, and you're just kind of giving me this, like, yeah. And
yeah,
I just remember being like, man, like, we can't fake it. Like, God
mm,
can handle our doubts and our hurts. And I think, when we're not honest with him, especially with him and with the church, we limit ourselves from growing. If we're a fake person, that fake person can't grow. The
yeah,
authentic broken side of us, that person can heal. But you have to be honest with him and let him have, your hurts. And that's one of my favorite things about David and some of the stories we hear about the lament. Like, God, I'm angry. Like, why did you, like, he can handle our hurt and our brokenness. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that to be healed, to grow, you have to be transparent and authentic about where you're actually at.
mm,
And that because he wants to meet us there. He's the best at that. And take us, where he wants to go. But if we're not willing to confess and say, man, here's where I'm broken, healing's a lot harder to do. And unfortunately, we live in a world that wants us to pretend all the time and fake it until we make it. And so I think one of the biggest things I would say is just, be honest with your father. He loves you. He already knows, and he can heal that stuff that you think is too ugly or too broken, because that's the kind of love that we have. And he's that incredible that there's no thing that we can do that's so ugly to him that he doesn't want anything to do with us, that he loves us where we're at. And to let that, just be a compass for us, and let him love us to whatever season he wants to grow us to, whatever challenge comes next. But yeah, that's a huge one for me, is that, I don't want people to pretend, because they're not going to go anywhere good when they do that.
Amen. I think that's a good stopping place. Jake, thanks for your time and being on. I pray people are encouraged by this episode. So
Me
thanks for
too.
being with us.